Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world that smells like boiled cabbage, echoes with the sound of bells and boots, and carries a silence that's somehow louder than any scream. You're about to become a child in a Victorian workhouse where losing everything doesn't mean your story is over. It just means it's about to change. The walls are high, the floor is cold, and your options few and far between. You probably won't survive this, not with your shoes falling apart and your ribs starting to show. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with a smell, not the sharp, sour stench of the workhouse just yet, but the faint reek of river sewage rising through the floorboards of your mother's rented room. She's been coughing more than usual. The baby hasn't stopped crying in days, and the landlord hasn't stopped knocking since Tuesday. You're 9 years old. You've learned to ignore the knocking, just like you've learned to fall asleep to the sound of rats thumping across the attic beams. But today, something's different. Your father's gone, buried in a pauper's grave 2 weeks ago, after dying from what someone whispered was the Blue Death cholera. He was a dock laborer, strong arms, but not enough coins in his pockets when the fever came. Now it's just you, your little brother Henry, and your mother, and her hands shake when she tries to lace her boots. She hasn't eaten since yesterday morning, gave her last bread to Henry. You watched, said nothing. That's how it goes now. You watch. You say nothing. That night she packs a bundle, not much in it, some rags, a wooden comb, the salter she won't part with. She wraps it in the old shawl your father gave her, the one with the hole in the elbow. She tells you not to cry. She doesn't say where you're going, but she doesn't need to, because you've passed the workhouse before, gray, blocky, windowless, in the wrong places. The smell of boiled turnips drifting out even when there's no wind. The place where the hopeless go. She walks with you down the road in the early light. There's fog thick enough to hide in. Henry stumbles twice. You pick him up each time. The workhouse gate comes into view like a ship's hull rising from the sea. You half expect it to move, to groan, to swallow you whole. Some say the workhouse is better than the street. At least it's dry. At least there's food. Others say it's where you go to disappear without dying. Historians still argue whether the system was built to help the poor or punish them for being poor in the first place. Either way, you're here now. You knock. A man opens the door. Thin mustache, thick ledger. He doesn't smile. He looks at your mother like she's just made the worst decision of her life. Maybe she has. You're ushered inside into a holding room with wooden benches that look like they've forgotten how to comfort anyone. There are other families there. Some whisper. Some don't look up. One girl stares at you with such blankness it feels like you're being erased. You sit. You wait. Hours. You try not to fidget, but the bench is hard and your trousers itch, and Henry is trying to pull your sleeve into his mouth again. Eventually, a woman in black, with a bonnet too tight, calls your name. Well, your last name. That's all that matters here. She leads you and Henry one way. Your mother is told to follow another. No hugs, no goodbye, just separation. That's rule one. Families are broken down and sorted into boxes like tools in a shed. Men, women, children, even the toddlers are marched away. You want to cry, but you don't. You're too stunned and too scared that if you start, you might not stop. The woman leads you down a long corridor. The stone beneath your feet echoes in ways that make you feel suddenly smaller than ever. It smells worse here, like boiled onions and lye. She opens a heavy door and points inside. Wait here. You do. Henry grabs your hand. The room is gray and gray and gray. Even the light coming through the upper window feels like it gave up on shining halfway down. You hear footsteps. More children. Some arrive, sobbing, some silent. You're one of the silent ones. There are no introductions, no friendly faces, just rows of beds, each with a scratchy wool blanket and a dented tin bowl on top. You don't know it yet, but this is your world now. The rules will come soon. The uniform, the chores, the punishment. But for tonight, it's just you and Henry on a bed that smells like damp shoes and old potatoes whispering to each other in the dark while trying not to let the walls hear your fear. You close your eyes, but you don't sleep. You wake before the bell. Or maybe you never really fell asleep. It's hard to tell. The gray light that seeps through the high window is the same as last night. Colorless, cold, uncertain. You blink and feel the stiffness in your limbs. Your arms wrapped around Henry all night, afraid he'd be taken while you slept. He's still there, curled like a kitten thumb, pressed to his chapped lips. A sound outside the door makes your stomach tighten. Not the bell yet, but a creak, a footfall, a key turning. You sit up quickly, trying to look like you were awake all along. You've already learned that looking alert even when you're not might buy you a moment of peace. The door opens. A woman enters, sharp shoulders and sharper shoes. She doesn't speak at first, just sweeps the room with her eyes. Behind her, a teenage girl wheels in a bucket of cold water and a stack of gray cloth. Up the woman says, her voice clipped like a knife on porcelain. Children rise. You do too. Henry whimpers beside you, but follows your lead. You're marched into a washing room. It's bare. Stone walls, a trough soap that smells like spoiled milk. The girl dumps a ladle of water over each head. You're last in line. The water's already cloudy when it hits you. Someone cuts your hair. A quick, crude hack with shears that nick your ear. You wince, but say nothing. Another worker hands you your new uniform. Shirt, trousers, undershirt, all the same dull beige. They smell of damp wool and something vaguely metallic, like rust. You try to change quickly, your face burning. There's no privacy, no modesty, just dozens of kids pulling clothes over thin limbs under the eyes of a bored matron. Henry's sleeves go past his fingers. He looks like a ghost pretending to be a boy. Once dressed, you're herded to a large room with rows of benches and long wooden tables. You sit. You wait. Everything here involves waiting. The bell finally rings. A second matron arrives with a bucket and begins slopping spoonfuls of something pale and lumpy into each child's bowl. It steams barely. You can't tell if it's porridge or mashed turnip or something else entirely. You've heard some boys call it bottle glue. You believe them. You eat, because not eating would be worse. You eat fast, too, because the faster ones get seconds from the bucket's bottom, if they're lucky. Today you aren't. You sneak glances around the room, boys with hollow eyes and quick hands. Girls who eat with one hand and guard their food with the other. Some are older than you, some younger, but all look like they've been scraped down to the bone. A bell rings again, and, like clockwork, everyone rises and files toward the next room. This is how your day begins. This is how it will begin every day. You're sent into the workroom, a cavernous hall filled with benches and rough rope. Today you're assigned to oakum, pulling apart old ship ropes to extract tar-soaked fibers. The rope stings your fingers, the tar seeps into your nails, and the air smells like burnt oil and sweat. Oakum is what they stuff between ship planks to keep water out, but no one tells you that. All you know is pick faster or you'll get the cane. Across from you, a boy named Edward hums a tune while he works. He's missing a front tooth. He winks at you. Don't bleed on the rope, he mutters. They don't like that. You believe him. And yes, your fingers do bleed by noon. You're not alone in that. The matron checks your progress and frowns. Slower than the last batch, she mutters to no one in particular. You aren't sure if she means rope or children. A few hours later, you're given a short break. Water, a dry crust. Henry curls against you in the corner, his eyes heavy. You think we'll see Mom again? He asks. You lie. Yeah. You hope the lie keeps him from breaking. Historians still debate whether workhouses were cruel by design or merely overwhelmed by numbers and need. Some say they provided vital structure. Others call them state-run prisons for the poor. The truth might be that it doesn't really matter when you're the one bleeding tar onto a bench while trying to keep your little brother from falling apart. You resume work. You keep your head down. You whisper made-up stories to Henry when no one's listening, about pirates who only eat cake, or wolves who live in chimneys and sing lullabies. He believes you. You pretend to believe yourself. By evening, your hands are numb. The bell rings again. Back to the washroom. Back to the beds. Henry falls asleep fast, this time. You stare at the ceiling eyes, tracing the cracks, the flicker of candlelight beyond the corridor. And in the silence you realize something. No one here has said your name all day. Only your number. Only your chore. You press your hand to your chest, half expecting your name to still be there. It is. Faint. Flickering. But still yours. And that's enough for now. You wake to the sound of bells again. They come in threes. One for waking, one for lining up, one for moving out. The third bell always feels like the worst. It means it's time to be seen, to be counted, to be sorted. This morning, the matrons come earlier than usual. You're still rubbing sleep from your eyes when they start calling out names, though names might be too generous. Numbers, mostly. A few first names if someone's new or if they want to make a point. You're taken with the others to the admittance hall. Henry's hand is in yours, sticky with sleep. The hall smells like vinegar and iron. On one side, there's a row of high-backed chairs. Behind them, a wooden table with a single ink bottle and a stack of ledgers so tall they seem to hold 100 years of stories. You wonder how many of them ended well. A man with a powdered wig, too large for his head, sits behind the desk, flipping through the book like he's deciding whether to buy you or ignore you. He gestures for you to come forward. You nudge Henry ahead. He stumbles a bit, but you both reach the front. "What's your name, boy?" Your voice is smaller than it should be. "William. William Hart." The man writes slowly. "Age 9. He looks at Henry and this one. "Henry. He's 5. The man sniffs. He writes again. "Parents, father's dead. Mother brought us." He doesn't ask more. He doesn't need to. He's probably seen hundreds like you already this month. Historians still argue whether the workhouse registers were a form of humane tracking or a cold mechanism of control. Some scholars claim it was administrative compassion. Others call it bureaucracy, masquerading as care. You're pretty sure it's the second one. Next comes the inspection. It's worse than it sounds, and it already sounded bad. 2 matrons bring you to a side room. One has a long stick with a hook at the end. You're told to strip. No, not just shoes. Everything. The room is freezing. They check your scalp for lice, your teeth for rot, your hands for sores. Henry starts crying when they poke at his bruised shoulder. They tell him to hush. You don't cry, you don't even blink. One of them scribbles something in a notebook. You don't ask what. After the inspection, you're given a bath again. But this one is different. The water is colder. The soap is sharper. And this time there's someone watching. Not watching like a caretaker. Watching like a hawk. As if you might steal the soap or run for the window. You do neither. You sit in the water while your knees knock together like spoons. When it's over, they hand you your uniform. Not the one from yesterday. This one's stiffer, cleaner. It's your official workhouse uniform now. Gray tunic, short trousers, thick socks that itch like nettles, a flat cap that's too big. Henry gets a matching set. His trousers are rolled up 5 times. He looks like a miniature chimney sweep. Once dressed, they take your old clothes and throw them into a basket. You don't realize until later that your mother's stitched handkerchief was still in your pocket. They didn't check. They didn't ask. They just took. The next part is worse. You're taken to the division hall. It's the place where families are separated permanently. Men go left. Women go right. Children go forward. You reach the middle and stop. Henry clutches your arm. His fingers dig into your sleeve like claws. Where's Mum? You don't know. She's just in the other wing, you whisper. Will we see her? Yes. Another lie. You tell so many of them now they're starting to feel like prayers. A woman with red cheeks and a sour face grabs Henry by the arm. No, wait, you start, but she's already pulling. His feet drag. He screams your name. Your body moves, but too slow. A hand grabs your collar. Another matron. She shakes her head once sharply. You'll make it worse for him, she says quietly. You want that, you don't. But you also don't want to let go. You do anyway. That's the kind of place this is. You watch Henry disappear through a door. You don't cry. You don't scream. You do nothing at all. Just breathe. Just stand. Just stay still long enough that maybe your shadow doesn't notice how small you feel. They assign you a new bed. Different ward. Older boys here. You're no longer with the babies. Your bunk is beneath a broken window. The wind whistles through the cracks like it's trying to sing you something sad. The boy in the bed next to yours has a black eye. He doesn't say hello. He just pulls his blanket tighter and turns away. You sit on your bed for a long time. Someone passes you a chipped tin cup of barley water. You sip it slowly. It tastes like cold soup and disappointment. You don't see Henry at dinner. You don't see him after. Not that night. Not the next day. Not the next week. You ask a matron once. She says he's in the infant ward. You'll see him at Sunday prayers. Sunday feels like years away, but eventually it comes. You're marched into the chapel with the others. Hard pews, thin hymn books, dusty air. The sermon is about obedience and humility, and something about the punishment of idle hands. You're not listening. You're scanning every row. And then you see him. 3 rows up. He's thinner. His cheeks are blotchy, but he sees you too, and he smiles. Just a little. Like his lips forgot how, but remembered at the last second. You want to run to him, to hold him, but you can't. So you do the only thing you're allowed. You mouth his name. He mouths yours back. That's enough. For now. The days blend together now. You lose track of how long you've been here. Time isn't counted in weeks or dates. It's counted in bells, in chores, and how many times you've scrubbed the same corner of the same hallway. The calendar on the chapel wall is turned by a gloved hand each Sunday, but you barely glance anymore. You measure time in scraped knuckles and how often your belly growls before supper. You're put on laundry duty today. The laundry room is a square of stone and steam with iron tubs and brick floors so cold they numb your toes through the worn soles of your boots. You stand in line, bucket in hand, until you're assigned a tub. Your job Stir sheets in hot water. With a wooden pole, rinse them in a separate basin, then drag them out and wring them by hand. You're 9 years old and barely weigh enough to lift a damp blanket, let alone twist it dry. By noon, your arms ache. The steam stings your eyes. The soap gets under your nails and leaves them raw. You've never been so clean and yet felt so dirty all at once. Every so often you glance at the back wall where there's a barred window, just high enough that if you stood on tiptoe and squinted, you could maybe see the roof line of the building across the courtyard. That becomes your break, your game. If you wring a sheet fast enough, you earn yourself 5 seconds to stretch and look. You imagine what it'd be like to climb out, to jump down, to run until your feet found the Thames and your arms found your mother again. You don't say it out loud, of course. Dreams like that are dangerous here. Someone might report you, might tell the matron you've got a restless temperament. And then punishment, solitary, bread and water. Historians still argue whether such punishments were intended to reform or to break spirits completely. Some call it moral correction. Others, more bluntly, call it cruelty with a halo. You call it what it is, fear. Still, not every moment is misery. Sometimes when the matrons aren't watching one of the older boys, Matthew tells stories while you work. He's 12 tall with a scar on his chin and a grin like he's hiding something wonderful. He tells you about a time he escaped for a whole day, snuck into a bakery, and ate a whole loaf before being caught. You think he's lying, but it doesn't matter. The way he tells it, even the crumbs sound golden. He gives you a nickname, Mouse. Because you're quiet, he says, but you don't miss a thing. You're not sure whether to be proud or insulted. You decide proud. A few times a week you see Henry again, sometimes in the chapel, sometimes in the courtyard during supervised play. Play is a generous word. You're allowed 20 minutes of movement, in silence. No running, no climbing, just exercise, which usually means walking in circles or standing in lines. But seeing Henry makes it worth it. You wave. He waves back. The two of you aren't allowed to talk. A boy got caned last week for whispering to his cousin. But you learn to communicate without words, pointing, nodding, the secret hand sign you made up when you were small. He looks better. Not happy, but whole. You cling to that. And then one afternoon, something changes. You're pulled from your laundry shift early. A matron says nothing, just points toward the office. You walk slowly, heartbeat in your throat. Are you in trouble? Did someone report you? Did they find the crust of bread you hid for Henry last week inside the office? You're surprised to see a familiar face. Your mother. Or someone who looks like her, only smaller, paler, older than you remember. She stands beside the ledger table, hands clenched in front of her. She doesn't smile. Neither do you. It's too soon. Too strange. I've come to visit, she says softly, almost as if she's asking permission. You look at the matron, who nods once and steps out, and then you're alone. You don't know what to say. Neither does she. Finally, she whispers, "They won't let me take you yet. Not until I find work. Not until I've got a room." You nod. You don't cry, but something cracks. She leans in, pulls something from her sleeve, a piece of fabric, blue and white, torn from your father's shirt. You remember this? You do. He used to wear it to church. It always smelled like wood smoke and beeswax. You take it, hold it tight. I'll come again, she says, and then I'll come for good. You nod again. You want to believe her. Historians still debate how often families were reunited after entering the workhouse. Some say it was rare, but possible. Others claim most children aged out before ever seeing their parents again. You don't know which side is right, but you decide to believe your mother. You hold the fabric close that night. You fall asleep with it tucked under your cheek, dreaming of wood smoke and beeswax and the sound of your father's voice telling you stories in the dark. The visit from your mother lingers like the scent of something sweet in a room that's mostly damp and soap. For days after your mind clings to her voice, her hands the square of fabric now hidden beneath the lining of your straw mattress. You reach for it some nights like a child clutching a talisman. You're not sure what you expect it to do. Bring her back, maybe, or slow time, or at least soften the corners of this place that seem to sharpen more each day. The bells go on ringing, of course. You're back in the routine now, up before dawn, wash, eat, work. Today, you're sent to the boot room. It's a long, low space lined with wooden racks and the thick stench of polished mud and something like vinegar. Your job: clean the shoes of the staff and, more important, inmates. There are dozens of them. Some are cracked and full of holes. Others stiff with wax and brass buckles that have never touched mud. You scrape, scrub, buff, repeat. The brushes are heavy. The rags stink. The polish clings to your hands even after washing, turning your fingernails black. A girl your age sits across from you, working in silence. You've seen her before in the dining hall, near the end of the row. She never speaks. You try anyway. Do they ever let you outside? She glances at you once, then back at the boots. They did once, she murmurs, when a chimney sweep got stuck. That shuts you up for a while. You work faster. Across the room you see Matthew again. He's sorting firewood. He gives you a nod, then tosses you something small, wrapped in cloth. You hide it quickly. Later, when no one's watching, you open it. Half a biscuit, soft, sweet. You eat it in 3 bites, feeling more full than you've felt in days. That night, Matthew finds you in the washroom. You're welcome. He grins. You nod. He leans closer. Heard they're sending some of us to the mill. Rope works. You swallow. That's worse than the boot room. Worse than Oakham. Rope mills mean machines. And machines mean accidents. Maybe not you, he says. You're small. Good for chimney work. He says it like it's a compliment. You say nothing. You lie awake that night, imagining all the things that could go wrong in a chimney. You dream of ash and smoke and hands reaching down to pull you out, but never quite reaching far enough. The next morning it rains. Not the polite, misty kind. the hard, slanting kind that beats against the windows like it's trying to get in. You're handed a coat, a heavy oilskin that smells like fish, and sent outside with a group of others. You're to help dig drainage around the garden. The ground is half frozen. The spade handle blisters your palms. Your boots soak through in minutes. You glance toward the far side of the yard. Past the wall, there's a sliver of street beyond. A baker's cart, a dog, a woman in a red shawl, hurrying under an umbrella. The world keeps existing out there, and somehow that's the hardest part, that people are still living normal lives, still buying bread, still walking their dogs, while you dig mud in borrowed boots and try not to shiver too loudly. One of the boys beside you vomits from the cold. He's not scolded, he's ignored. That's the rule here. Weakness isn't punished, it's erased. When you return inside, soaked and shaking, you see Henry in the corridor. He's holding a mop. They've put him on floor duty. He smiles when he sees you, but his lip is split. You point. He shrugs. Said I looked at a matron too long, he whispers. You feel the heat rise behind your eyes, but you can't do anything. If you lash out, they'll separate you again. So instead you kneel beside him, tug his cap lower over his forehead, and say, "You still look like a prince." He grins, blood on his teeth, but still a grin. That night during supper, the lights flicker, the gas lines are faulty, and for a few seconds everything goes black. Someone lets out a tiny gasp, then quiet, stillness. You sit in the dark bowl in hand and listen to the breaths around you, to the way the silence makes the space feel enormous. Then the lights return, dim, yellow, but enough. And somehow you feel more tired than ever. Historians still debate the psychological toll of growing up in institutions like this. Some say it built discipline. Others point to generations of trauma and silence that followed. You suspect the truth is not in either camp. It's in moments like this, in the silence during supper, in the cold hands around warm bowls, in the way you start to forget the sound of your own laughter, or what you even look like when you smile. But you remember Henry. You remember your mother. You remember stories. And those, for now, are your small rebellions. You lie awake that night and whisper a tale you invent on the spot, about a boy with a spoon that turned anything it touched into cake. Henry listens with his eyes wide, then closed, then breathing slow. You fall asleep mid-sentence. That's okay. The ending can wait. The next morning, the matron calls your name twice. Not William, not boy, not even Mouse. Your full name with a clipboard in one hand and her eyes scanning your boots. That's how you know something's different. That name only comes out when things are about to change. You're sent to the sorting room. It's not the worst job, not yet, but it's a test. The sorting room is filled with piles of fabric rags, mostly donated, discarded, forgotten. Some still smell like perfume or coal smoke or old soap. You're handed gloves and a mask, not because they care about germs but because they don't want you sneezing on things that might be reused. Your task is to separate linen from wool cotton from canvas. Things that can be patched, resoled, burned. You sit cross-legged on the floor with a bin beside you and a stack in front, one piece at a time. White dress sleeve with lace. Into the fine cloth bin. Torn curtain with a scorch mark. Burn pile. Something stiff and sticky that might have been a sock once. You don't ask. Just toss it behind you and try not to think about it. Matthew's here too. So is the girl from the boot room. And for a few hours, it's quiet work. Mindless, in the best way. You find a glove with beads on it. Someone once wore this to a ball, maybe, or to church. You slide it onto your small hand and wiggle your fingers, imagining a ballroom instead of a damp gray room. Matthew sees and raises an eyebrow. You both stifle a laugh. This is how rebellion starts. Not with fire, with jokes, with glances, with pretending. Later that day, someone breaks a rule. You don't see it. You only hear the fallout. A scream. A chair knocked over. Then the swift, hard slap of a cane against a wall. Everyone freezes. The matron storms in red-faced, holding a handkerchief soaked in ink. Someone wrote a note, apparently. Something rude. Something dangerous. They don't say what it was. They don't have to. She demands the culprit. No one speaks. She glares at you, then Matthew, then the girl. All of you, she says through clenched teeth, will scrub the east stairwell until the stone shines like glass. Scrubbing stone is like trying to polish regret. It never quite works. The brushes are stiff, your knees go numb, and your shoulders burn before the first landing. By nightfall, your hands are raw again. But no one confesses. That's something. Historians still argue about the psychological bonds that formed in institutions like this. Were they born of camaraderie or survival, genuine affection, or just trauma laced with familiarity? You decide. It doesn't matter. Matthew winked at you before the punishment started. That means more than a scholarly debate ever could. Sunday comes again. The chapel smells like cold candles and something sweet, maybe someone spilled barley syrup. You find Henry in the second row this time. He's holding a book upside down, pretending to read. You hide a grin. During the hymn, you glance sideways and see the girl from the boot room. She's mouthing the words, her lips moving silently to music she barely hears. She catches your eye and gives you the faintest nod. You nod back. It's strange, isn't it? How even here in this place built to erase people, you keep finding them. People with stories. People who matter. That afternoon, they post a notice in the hall. A list of children being moved. Transferred to other facilities, it says. Your name isn't on it. Henry's isn't either, but Matthew's is. You find him later, sitting on the windowsill in the laundry hall. He doesn't look scared. He looks like someone waiting for the next chapter. They're sending me to the countryside, he says. Or so they say. You sit beside him. They'll work you harder out there, you say. He shrugs. At least the air might smell like trees. He reaches into his coat and pulls something out. A button, smooth, shiny, gold-painted. He presses it into your hand. From the beaded glove, he says, "For luck." You want to say something important, but instead you just say, "Thanks." And that's enough. That night you lie in bed and clutch the button between your fingers. It's warm from your skin. You wonder where Matthew is now, what his next bed looks like, whether he's breathing softer out there under different stars. The button stays in your pocket from then on, along with the square of your father's shirt. Tiny bits of freedom carried in fabric and metal. They can strip your name. They can cut your hair. They can number your meals and ration your soap. But they can't take stories or buttons. Not yet. Oats into a pot of hot water. You eat it without flinching now. That's how you know you've adapted. Not improved, just molded into the shape the workhouse wants. Today they hand you a different smock. This one's gray, not brown. You're moved to the weaving room. It's better than oakum, they say, but only just. You follow a stiff-backed overseer down a narrow corridor lined with locked cupboards. You half expect to be marched into a punishment cell, but instead the door opens into a cavernous space filled with looms, wooden beasts, huge and creaking. Rows of children sit between them, threading, pulling, guiding yarn through impossible patterns. The air is filled with a strange rhythm, clack-whir, like the heartbeat of some mechanical monster. You're shown to a bench, told to watch. A girl, maybe 13, sits beside you. She doesn't smile, doesn't speak, just works. Fingers darting between threads, eyes barely blinking. Eventually, you're handed your own spool. Your job, keep the tension even. Not too loose, not too tight. Or you'll snap the warp, the overseer growls. You don't know what the warp is. You nod. Anyway, by midday your hands are sore. By the second hour, your eyes sting from watching the same 2 inches of yarn over and over. And by the third, you snap the warp. It makes a sound like breaking violin strings. Everyone flinches. The girl beside you closes her eyes. The overseer storms over, seizes your wrist and growls, "That's a half-day's wages wasted." You don't even earn wages. You get gruel and a slap on the back of the head if you complain. That night, back in your dormitory, you try not to cry, not because you're strong, but because tears feel like a waste now. Instead, you stare at the ceiling and try to remember a joke Matthew told you. Something about a goat and a policeman and a missing pie. You can't remember the punchline. That bothers you more than anything else today. Across the room, someone coughs. Then again, then again. It's the rattle you've come to recognize. Consumption, tuberculosis. The child is moved by mourning. You don't ask where. You just note the empty blanket and the untouched bowl at breakfast. Historians still debate whether workhouses spread illness or simply exposed what was already there. Some say overcrowding made it worse. Others blame poor nutrition, cold dormitories, and damp walls. You blame all of it. And the silence. Always the silence. 2 days later, a surprise. A letter. Not for you, letters aren't for people like you, but for the boy in the next cot. He holds the envelope like it might burn him, smells it, runs his thumb over the wax seal, then hides it under his pillow without opening it. You ask why. He shrugs. If I don't read it, he whispers, it's still good news. You lie awake thinking about that. You wonder if there's a letter out there for you. From your mother. From the version of her who still tucks your hair behind your ears and sings off-key lullabies. You dream of her again. This time she's wearing the red shawl you saw that woman wear outside the yard. She's smiling, holding out a hand. You reach for it, but wake up too soon. The next day you get caught sneaking a crust to Henry again. You're not beaten this time. Just denied supper, and your name is written in the discipline ledger, which is somehow worse. Permanent. Like your disobedience has been made official. You don't regret it, though. Henry has thinner cheeks now. You do it again tomorrow. Later that week, you hear whispers about a fire in the next parish's workhouse. The story changes with each telling. A candle knocked over. A pot left too long on the stove. Someone fell asleep while mending socks and didn't notice the smoke. No one knows how many children were hurt. Some say none, some say dozens. You don't ask the truth. The idea is enough. Fire is terrifying here. Not just because of burns, because of what they take with them. Names, ledgers, blankets, letters, never read. That night you press your button and shirt scrap tighter in your fist and make a promise to yourself. You will not become one of the forgotten. You might be quiet. You might be small. You might scrub floors and fumble looms and sleep on straw. But your stories matter, even if no one hears them, even if they only live in your own head. Especially then. That's how things survive. Not by permission, but by remembering. Anyway, it begins with a cart. A wooden, creaky thing pulled by a wheezing pony and guided by a man with hands like tree bark. He arrives in the courtyard just after sunrise. A list nailed to the side of the wagon and a sack of apples perched on the driver's seat like a bribe from the outside world. You and 20 other children are lined up against the wall like mismatched socks. You've been selected to go to the paper factory. Not permanently, they say, just a temporary work rotation. But in the workhouse, temporary can mean a week, a month, or the rest of your life. No one ever clarifies. You're handed a new smock, coarse gray and too large, and your name is checked off by a woman with a feather quill and eyes that never look up. You wonder if she's ever smiled or eaten an apple that wasn't dried into pulp and packed into a tin. The cart ride is cold. You sit squeezed between two older boys who smell like smoke and socks. No one speaks. You all stare ahead, past the iron gates, past the trees, bare of leaves, past the smoke curling from chimneys that belong to people who have never even seen the inside of a workhouse. The factory is worse than you imagined. It smells like rotting cabbage and ink. Inside, everything is damp: your skin, your shoes, even your breath. The walls drip, the floors squelch. You're assigned to rags to pulp, which, yes, is exactly what it sounds like. They hand you a wooden paddle and a tub of cloudy water. Your job: stir and stir and stir until the rags disintegrate into a mush that can be strained and rolled and dried into something someone might scribble polite letters on someday. It's slow, tedious, and absolutely punishing. By the second hour, your arms ache. By the third, your skin is puckered and gray. The boy beside you mutters something about losing a fingernail last week. You try not to look at his hands. At lunch, you're given bread. Just bread. Dry crusted, hard as a roof tile. You crack a tooth trying to chew it. A girl from the corner sneaks you a sliver of cheese when no one's looking. You think it might be the nicest thing anyone's ever done for you. You work until dusk. No school, no chapel, no singing, just pulp. You return to the cart limping, stiff, shivering. And when you finally crawl into the straw pile that serves as a bed, you close your eyes and see nothing but rags swirling in gray water. That night, you dream of parchment, soft, perfect parchment, with gold filigree and your name written in calligraphy across the top. Not boy number 19, not inmate unskilled. Your name, in full, even in dreams, you can't quite spell it. Back at the workhouse a week later, the matron doesn't greet you, just points toward the laundry. You drag your feet. The floorboards groan under you. It's like the building itself resents your return. But something's changed. Maybe it's the way you carry yourself, or the thin line of a bruise still visible under your left eye, or the way you don't flinch anymore when someone yells. Henry notices. You look taller, he says, handing you a sock. Must be the soap fumes, you reply. You both grin. There's a rhythm again. It's not comfort. It's not joy. But it's motion. You scrub. You eat. You sleep. You keep the button in your pocket. You wrap your square of shirt tighter. You count the breaths between footsteps in the hall. Learn which floorboards squeak. Before morning checks, memorize the order of chores so well that you can sweep in your sleep. Sometimes you do. And then one morning, everything turns sideways. A visitor arrives. Not just any visitor. A benefactor. That's what the staff call her. She's tall, pale, dressed in silk, with a bonnet so wide it brushes the doorframe. She walks through the halls like she's never seen a child before. Her gloves are cream-colored. She doesn't remove them. She pauses in front of you, tilts her head. How old is this one, she asks. 10, ma'am, replies the matron, though you're 11. Strong, resilient, she hums. Too small for field work, she mutters, but clever hands. She keeps walking. You never find out her name. But 2 boys leave with her. One returns 3 days later, silent. The other never comes back. Historians still argue about the nature of these adoptions. Were they benevolent gestures or a more polished form of indenture. You suspect it depends on the gloves. If they come off, maybe kindness has a chance. If not, well. Back in the dormitory that night, Henry is sitting on the edge of your bed. He looks serious. There's talk he whispers. About what running? You freeze. Out the back gate, he says, during deliveries, one boy made it last winter. And, don't know, might have frozen, might have made it to the river. You look at the button in your hand, think of the cart, the factory, the silk bonnet. You look at Henry. And for a moment, just a flicker, you wonder if he'd survive out there. If either of you would. The back gate isn't locked during deliveries. That's what Henry says. And Henry listens more than he talks, so you believe him. But still you wait. 3 days pass, then 5, then 10. You walk the yard during morning breaks and glance over at the iron gate with its rusted hinges and flaking paint. It doesn't look like freedom. It looks like a question. One of those cruel ones that sounds like hope, but bites like regret. You're still thinking about it when they move you to the kitchen. Not for punishment, surprisingly, but because the last boy burned his thumb in the stew pot and started screaming Latin phrases no one understood. The kitchen is hot, noisy, and full of smells that range from wonderful to why is this alive? Your job peel, potatoes, turnips, carrots, sometimes apples, if you're lucky. You're handed a blunt knife and a bucket. You eat it, you peel it, says Cook, who is somehow both the largest and quietest man you've ever seen. He speaks like thunder wrapped in wool. At first you think the job's a blessing. You're warm. You're not lifting stone or stirring pulp. And sometimes, just sometimes, Cook accidentally leaves behind a crust of pie or the heel of a loaf which just happens to find its way to your pocket. But the novelty fades quickly. Your fingers cramp from the motion. Your wrists ache. And you're constantly reminded that this isn't kindness. It's merely a different sort of hardship. Still, the kitchen gives you access to something new information. You hear things. Which children are being sent to the fields. Which ones have a fever. Which ones are up for special review, whatever that means. And you hear about another escape. A boy. 12. Tried to slip out with a trash cart. Made it half a mile. They found him near the riverbank, soaked and shivering, hiding under a barrow of cabbages. He's back now. Doesn't talk. Only hums. The same 3 notes. Over and over. Historians still wonder why so many escape attempts happened in clusters. Was it desperation? The influence of a single ringleader, or just the contagious dream of not being here? You don't know. You just know the humming scares you more than the cane. And then one day, Cook takes ill. Not the coughing kind. The silent, slumped over the basin kind. The doctor comes. You didn't even know there was a doctor for staff. He wears a hat too small for his head and smells like vinegar. You're asked to stay out of the kitchen. You're sent to the laundry again. It's back-breaking work, but familiar. Henry's there. He's folding sheets like they're maps to somewhere better. When you ask him if he still wants to run, he shrugs. Depends who's coming with me. You say nothing, but later You tuck an extra biscuit into your pocket, just in case. You dream that night of doors, some open, some locked, and one that leads to a forest filled with bells. You wake up to a scream. It's the boy who hums. He's crying now, full sobs, broken, ragged, echoing off stone. He's being moved. Too unstable, someone mutters. You watch as he's carried down the hall like a sack of oats. He clutches a scrap of blanket like it's a lifeline. And for the first time since he came back, he speaks. 2 words. Don't follow. The matron orders everyone to bed early that night. Lights out before sunset. No whispering. No movement. You lie there, eyes wide, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling. Your heart pounds. Is this how it happens? Does someone just vanish, and everyone pretends nothing happened? Apparently, yes. The next morning, his bed is made, neatly, with tucked corners, as if he never existed. You try to remember his name. Fail. That afternoon, the matron announces a surprise inspection from the board. You don't know what that is, but everyone scrambles. Windows are cleaned. Smocks are scrubbed. Children are lined up in height order and told to smile like they've eaten oranges in the last year. Henry elbows you. Think I still have teeth? You smirk. I think I dreamed about an orange once. The board arrives in carriages. Clean boots, clean gloves, clean voices. They smell like starch and lavender. You're asked questions. How are the meals? What do you learn in chapel? Is the staff kind? You nod. You recite the hymn verse. You do not mention the button or the shirt square or the boy who vanished. Because some stories don't survive visitors, and because you're tired, so tired. When the board leaves, things return to normal, which is to say worse. More chores, more silence, more gray. But something inside you shifts. Maybe it's the dream, maybe it's the scream, or maybe it's the whisper you overhear near the laundry 2 nights later. They're cutting the meat portions. They already cut them. No, I mean again. A pause for the children. Another pause. They won't last the winter. You clutch your button tighter, not because it brings comfort, but because it reminds you that you're still here, still counting, still real, even if no one else sees you, yet. There's no snowfall yet, but the chill in the morning air has teeth now. You wake with your nose already cold and your breath forming faint clouds that vanish as quickly as hope. Winter is coming fast, and in the workhouse that's not just a phrase. It's a warning. Your blanket feels thinner, not because it's changed, but because you have less flesh on your bones, more aches in your joints. You wrap it around yourself like armor and glance across the dormitory. Henry's already awake, staring at the ceiling, with the sort of expression that suggests his dreams were worse than usual. He sees you. 2 more weeks, he whispers. You don't ask what he means, because you know he's going to try it. The back gate, the river path, the biscuit you gave him is still hidden inside his boot wrapped in cloth. And now you have to ask yourself a question you've been dodging for weeks. Are you going with him? But the moment never arrives. Because that morning you're called upstairs. Not to the kitchen, not to the laundry. Upstairs. A place you've never been. You climb the stairs like they might collapse beneath you, every step creaking under the weight of confusion and dread. A maid, one of the older girls with a scar on her chin, guides you down a narrow hall past closed doors and a portrait of a man with eyes too alive to be comforting. You're led into a study. It's warm, and it smells like paper and tea. There's a woman at the desk. Not the matron, someone else, someone official. She's holding a file. Your file. She looks up and gives a polite, distant smile. You're being considered, she says, for what you ask. A placement. You blink. She elaborates. A parish family. No children of their own. They've asked for help. You're on the list. You say nothing. Do you have any objections? She asks. You shake your head. Because what are objections worth here? Good, she says, and makes a note. You're dismissed. Just like that. Back in the yard, you find Henry by the fence, kicking a stone with more focus than most people devote to prayer. You were gone, he says. You nod. They said, a family, you whisper. He doesn't look at you, just nods slowly. Guess that's good, he says. Is it? You don't know. But the next few days, everything feels different. The food tastes the same. The chores remain punishing. The matron still yells if you drop a towel. But the world tilts slightly like someone's nudged it with a quiet finger. You're being watched, assessed, tested. They want to know if you're fit for family. So you work harder. Smile when spoken to. You even sing quietly during chores. And yet there's something heavy inside you. A guilt shaped like Henry. You start splitting your bread with him again. You clean his tools when he forgets. You leave the bucket a little fuller for his laundry pile. He notices, doesn't mention it, but you see it in the way his shoulders loosen. And then, 3 nights later, it happens. You're woken before dawn, not by a bell, by a whisper. Come on, he says. He's at your cot. Boots on, bag packed, eyes clear. It's now or never. Your throat tightens. Your hand clutches the button in your fist. You sit up. Swing your legs over the edge. The floor is freezing. Your toes curl. He's watching you, waiting. And you say no, not with words, just a look, a barely there shake of the head. He nods, once, turns, and is gone. By morning, there's shouting, a search, a name scrawled on the ledger in red ink. But no boy. They never find him. Some say he drowned. Some say wolves got him. Some say he made it to the coast and boarded a fishing boat to France. You hope it was the last one. You need to believe it was the last one. Historians still debate how many workhouse runaways actually survived. Most didn't, but a few did. The stories exist, fragmented, unproven, whispered across generations, and sometimes that's enough. Your placement is confirmed the following week. You're given a coat. It doesn't fit, but it has buttons, real ones, shiny and black, You touch them constantly. They feel like punctuation, like commas in a sentence that might finally end somewhere decent. The couple arrives in a carriage. The man smells like ink and wool. The woman smells like lavender and something faintly floral. They ask your name. You give it. Your real one. Not your workhouse number. Not your chore title. They smile. You sit between them. You leave the workhouse without looking back, not because you don't care, but because you already know every brick, every creak, every ghost behind those walls. And because if you look back, you might see Henry standing behind the gate, grinning or not. But you keep your hand in your pocket, wrapped around the old button, because no matter where you go, you are not forgetting, you are not erasing, you are adding. And for the first time in years, you are not alone. The carriage rocks side to side like a cradle with poor rhythm. You sit stiffly between two people who call themselves Mr. and Mrs. Lorimer. Their coats are thick, their collars crisp, and their voices the kind you'd only ever heard from the top of a staircase before. They speak kindly, or at least carefully, like they're trying not to spook you, which is odd because you've spent years scrubbing floors and surviving off crusts. You've been yelled at by people in finer hats than theirs. What could they possibly say that would scare you? Now, Mrs. Lorimer hands you a biscuit, not just any biscuit. It crumbles gently, tastes of sugar and butter and something citrusy you can't quite name. You nibble it slowly, eyes darting between them, trying to determine if it's a test. It isn't. They're taking you to the countryside, to their estate. You don't know what an estate is, not exactly, but the word makes you picture trimmed hedges and doors that never slam, and maybe a fireplace that stays lit even when no one's being punished. The trip takes hours. Your legs go numb. Your thoughts churn. What if this is just another version of the workhouse? With porcelain instead of tin, velvet instead of wool. Does comfort erase control or just perfume it? Eventually, the carriage slows. You peek through the window, and there it is, the Lorimer home. Stone walls covered in ivy, glass windows with diamond panes, a front door that looks like it's never needed to be kicked shut. A dog barks from somewhere beyond the hedges, not a growl, but a greeting, and the chimney smoke smells like actual wood, not coal and cabbage. You're ushered inside. The floors are warm. Rugs, real rugs, cover the wood. A staircase climbs upward like it has nothing to prove. Mrs. Lorimer speaks to a maid in soft tones. They show you to a room, not a dormitory. A room, your room. Bed, desk, window, curtains. You've never had curtains before. You pull them aside and see fields stretching out into a horizon that looks like it might actually go on forever. The bed has a quilt, blue and green squares sewn together in patterns. It smells faintly of lavender. There's even a bookshelf, a real one, with books that don't have numbers stamped on their spines. You sit on the edge of the bed, not sure what to do. No one hands you a brush. No one yells. No one asks you to peel potatoes or polish boots. Eventually, Mr. Lorimer knocks. Would you like to walk the garden? You say yes, because you don't know how to say no yet. The garden is tidy, but not cruelly so. There's a pond with fat fish that come to the surface like they're expecting conversation. Mr. Lorimer tells you about the plants, what blooms in spring, what needs pruning, what the gardener insists is a weed, but his wife calls charming. You nod, you listen, and you think this doesn't feel real. Because here's the secret the workhouse never tells you. Freedom, when it arrives, is terrifying. There's no schedule here, no bell to tell you the when to rise, eat scrub, pray sleep. You wake in the morning because birds chirp outside your window. You eat meals because someone invites you to. You walk outside not as a chore, but because you can. And at night you lie under a quilt instead of a drafty ceiling, and you stare at the shadows cast by a fireplace, not the flickering gaslight from the corridor. One day, Mrs. Lorimer brings you a pencil and paper. Write whatever you like, she says. You stare at the blank page. Write your name. Pause. Then, underneath slowly, you write Henry's. Just his name. No address. No story. Because where would you begin? Historians still argue whether these placements were truly charitable or merely social theater for the wealthy. Was it reform or reputation? But to you sitting in a warm room with a pencil that doesn't need to be returned, you don't care, because it's real. You draw a map of the house, then the garden, then from memory the workhouse. You don't forget. You recreate every corner of it. The courtyard, the cracked tile by the matron's desk, the laundry hooks shaped like crooked teeth. You even draw the stairs that creaked in a specific order if you snuck down for a sliver of bread. It's all still there, inside you. And yet, so is this. The pond, the books, the way Mr. Lorimer listens when you speak, the way Mrs. Lorimer waits for your answer like it matters. One evening, you're invited to dinner with guests. You've never been at a dinner table where people ask your opinion. You're offered meat pie and roast carrots and a pudding that jiggles like it's unsure of its role. You say something that makes one of the guests laugh, not at you, with you. And afterward, as the adults sip tea and talk of crops and trains, you slip away and sit by the fireplace. You reach into your pocket. The button is still there, smoothed by years of fingers. You don't need it anymore, but you don't let it go either. Because it's not just a reminder of pain. It's proof that you were there, that you survived, that you can hold on to something small and useless and make it sacred. That night you dream of Henry again. He's older, smiling. He's sitting in a boat, drifting down a wide river under a sky full of stars. He waves. You wave back. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. And when you wake, you write it all down. Every word. You begin waking before the sun. Not because you have to, There are no bells here, no clanging buckets, no shouting. Overseers yanking blankets off beds. But because something inside you is still on duty, it's as if your bones don't yet believe you're safe, so they rouse you early, just in case. You sit by the window and watch the horizon bleed slowly into color. Mist drapes the field like a sleeping thing, and sometimes you catch the flick of a fox's tail or the flap of a crow's wing in the hedgerows. It feels like a secret hour, one the house hasn't yet noticed. Eventually, the Lorimers stir. Mrs. Lorimer pads through the halls in slippers with tassels and yawns like she's never feared waking up. Mr. Lorimer hums to himself while shaving. You overhear them speak of planting and guests and a cousin's visit. Normal things, soft things. Breakfast is usually eggs and toast, though once there were pancakes, and you nearly wept because they smelled like memory. They don't notice the way you stare at the butter dish, or maybe they do, and just let you stare. Some days, you follow Mr. Lorimer into the orchard. You learn the names of trees: pear, apple, plum. You learn that pears bruise faster, that plums need pruning, and that apples come in more varieties than you thought existed. You help gather the windfall into baskets. The act feels familiar, like collecting laundry. But the stakes are different. No one's watching. No one times you. There's no fear of failing. Other days, Mrs. Lorimer invites you to read. You sit beside her on a velvet settee that tries too hard to look antique, and she opens books with dog-eared pages and tea stains and underlines made in blue ink. She asks you to read aloud. You're slow, stumbling over long words and forgetting what punctuation means. But she's patient. Breathe at the commas, she says. So you do, and slowly, stories begin to unfold. Nights and sea voyages. Orphans who find treasure. Girls who tame dragons. You stop one day and ask, "Are these true?" She laughs softly. True enough to matter, and that's when something breaks loose inside you. Because back in the workhouse, truth was pain. Here it might be poetry. You find yourself writing again. Mostly small things at first. A dream you had about a house made of feathers. A conversation you imagined between the moon and a fence post. A letter to Henry you'll never send. You tuck them under your pillow, like charms. Sometimes in the hallway you pass the maid who first brought you upstairs at the workhouse. She's here too, somehow, visiting her sister, one of the gardeners. She nods at you once, nothing more. But you see the faint twitch of recognition in her eyes. She knows who you were, not who you are. That afternoon, you overhear a conversation you weren't meant to. Mrs. Lorimer speaking to someone in the drawing room. He flinches less now, she says. You pause. He still keeps everything. The crusts, the buttons, the bits of string. A pause. I suppose it's how they survive. They build museums inside themselves, just to remember they were people. You walk away before you hear more. That night you look at your box of collected things. the original button, a bent hairpin you'd found in the kitchen once, the cloth wrapping from the biscuit Henry never took, and you realize she's not wrong. You've built a museum, and every item is a label that reads, "I lived through this." Historians still debate the psychological aftermath of workhouse life, especially on children. Did comfort heal, or did it merely hide the cracks? Did survivors assimilate, or did they carry invisible weight for the rest of their days? You think maybe both are true. One evening, the Lorimers host a recital. Music. People in gloves arrive, and the sitting room smells like perfume and polished wood. A girl no older than you plays the piano with hands like fluttering leaves. You watch her, not with envy, but awe, because it never occurred to you that fingers could make beauty. You ask Mrs. Lorimer afterward if you might learn too. She smiles, and 2 mornings later, a man named Mr. Tilbury appears with spectacles that slide down his nose and a case full of sheet music. He smells like peppermint and ink, and when you sit at the piano, he doesn't laugh when your fingers fumble. He just says, "Again," and again you try. Slowly, music begins to spill from your hands, not gracefully, not correctly, but sincerely. And it feels like you've cracked open something ancient and soft inside yourself. That night, you can't sleep. So, you walk down to the garden. The stars are huge, loud things overhead, like they're shouting in silence. And as you sit by the pond, you reach into your pocket. You take out the button, and with fingers trembling slightly, you press it into the earth, not to bury it, but to plant it. You don't know what will grow. Maybe nothing, maybe weeds, maybe something strange and nameless. But it feels like the right thing to do, because now finally, you don't need to carry it anymore. You half expect the button to sprout something overnight, a silver-leafed vine or a memory-shaped flower. Of course it doesn't. The soil remains undisturbed, save for the small indentation where your thumb pressed it into the dirt. But still, something feels different. You sleep deeper that night. You don't wake at the sound of floorboards or distant dogs. You don't wake at all until morning light slips gently across your cheek, and for the first time in you don't know how long, you feel rested. Mr. Tilbury returns for your second piano lesson. He brings a metronome that clicks with relentless precision, like a wooden beetle trying to argue with you. Your fingers trip over the notes, and your cheeks flush with the hot shame of being clumsy. But he doesn't scold. He just adjusts the tempo nods and waits. Again and again, and somehow by the end of the hour, you've managed a whole melody. Mrs. Lorimer claps softly from the doorway, eyes crinkled in that way adults do when they're proud but trying not to scare you with it. You can't help it, you smile. A real one, not the polite kind you used at the workhouse to stay invisible. In the days that follow, a new rhythm forms. Mornings in the orchard, midday lessons, afternoons with books, evenings with music. Sundays they let you ride to town in the carriage. You pass fields, stone walls, thatched cottages. The town smells of bread and horses, and you hold on to the railing with both hands as if the wind might lift you into the sky. You don't say much in public. You still haven't found your voice in crowds. But you listen, and you notice. People here aren't staring at you like you're strange. They don't know where you came from. They just nod, smile, go about their business. And it dawns on you, your past is no longer printed across your face like soot or numbers. You're becoming someone new. You find a cat behind the stables one morning, scrawny, one ear half missing, named Thimble according to the stable boy. She hisses the first time you offer her a scrap, but eventually accepts it, then curls into your lap like you've always been hers. You tell her everything about Henry, about the cracked tile by the matron's desk, about the button now resting under the pond tree. She blinks slowly at you, and somehow that feels like understanding. One day Mr. Lorimer calls you into the study. You brace for something. Old habits die hard, but it's only to ask, would you like to attend school? You freeze, because in the workhouse school meant learning to fold napkins and recite verses you didn't understand. Here he means books, lessons, desks and chalk, and questions that might actually have more than one right answer. You nod. He smiles. Uniform's a bit ugly, he warns. You laugh. The first real laugh that doesn't sound borrowed. Historians still argue about the education of workhouse children, whether it was genuine or just a method of discipline in disguise. Most were trained for labor. Few were taught to dream. But here in this home with its pond and piano and scarred cat, it feels like dreaming might be allowed. You go with Mrs. Lorimer into town for your school supplies. She lets you choose your own pencil case. You pick the one with stars, even though it's clearly meant for someone younger. Stars are timeless, she says, and that settles it. On the walk back, she asks you what you want to be when you grow up. You pause. Want. You'd never been allowed to want before. Need. Yes, fear constantly, but want. The question hangs in the air like mist. Finally, you say, a writer. She smiles. Then you'll need a notebook. And she buys you two. Back home, you fill the first pages with tiny sketches of things you never want to forget. The curl of Thimble's tail, the reflection of the moon in the pond, the creak of the piano bench, the hush of the house after dark. You don't write about the workhouse yet, not directly, but it's there, like a quiet hum beneath every word. Because trauma is a stubborn tenant. It stays, even when it stops shouting. But here's the thing, it's getting quieter. Every time you name a flower, every time you master a new scale, every time you open your eyes and realize you're still here, still safe, still becoming. You wonder if Henry made it somewhere like this, if he found someone who asked his opinion about carrots, if he got to see stars without bars. Maybe he did, or maybe he's still running. But either way, you whisper goodnight to him sometimes, just in case. And when you do, you're not sure if you feel sad or grateful. Maybe both. Maybe that's what healing is. Not forgetting, but remembering differently. Your first day of school arrives with the kind of gray sky that feels undecided, neither stormy nor clear, just vaguely damp, like the world hasn't made up its mind. You stare at your reflection in the mirror, dressed in a stiff blue uniform with polished shoes and a satchel too big for your frame. The collar itches. Mrs. Lorimer ties your scarf a little too tightly, then immediately apologizes and loosens it with a flustered pat on your shoulder. She gives you a lunch wrapped in wax paper and a look that says you don't have to go if you don't want to, but you do. You really do. The carriage ride to school is quiet. Your heart is not. It thumps in your chest like a panicked bird, and for a moment you wonder what would happen if you just ran into the trees, over the hedge, disappeared like a storybook child. But you don't. You walk up the steps, enter the hallway, and it hits you immediately. School smells different from everything else. Ink, chalk, sweaty shoes, the faint perfume of soap, too flowery to be sincere. You're shown to your classroom. The desks are neat. The teacher, Miss Penrose, is young, her hair in a bun so tight it makes you wince just looking at it. She speaks crisply, but her eyes are kind. You take your seat in the back, near a window. And then it begins. Arithmetic, reading, geography. It's strange how your brain, once only trained to memorize punishments and footstep patterns, begins to absorb things like rivers, borders, and how many legs a spider has. 8. Definitely 8. But you write it twice just to be sure. You don't speak much that first day. You're used to silence as safety. But during break, a boy named Thomas offers you half a biscuit and asks if you like frogs. You say yes, because why not? You sit with him by the brick wall behind the playground, and he tells you he once found a toad the size of a shoe. You try to imagine a frog in your old dormitory and suddenly find yourself smiling. By the end of the week, you've learned 3 names, and none of them call you workhouse rat. That night you write in your notebook, "First week survived." Also, frogs are apparently sacred in this school. Mrs. Lorimer reads it over your shoulder and snorts into her tea. The days blur together. You learn how to divide fractions. You dissect a tulip in science class. You read a story about a girl who turns invisible, and you feel it in your bones, the ache of being unseen, the thrill of being ignored, and the sudden awful realization of wanting to be found. Miss Penrose pulls you aside one afternoon. "I like your writing," she says, tapping her finger gently on your latest assignment. You notice things others don't. It's the first real praise you've ever received from an adult who wasn't being paid to be kind. It feels like light on skin, warm, startling. Historians still argue whether formal education truly erased the class lines drawn by the workhouse system. Many graduates still found themselves consigned to low-wage labor. But a few, just a few, broke through, found voices, told stories. You start to think maybe you could be one of them. Your piano playing improves too, Mr. Tilbury teaches you a piece called The Robin's Farewell, and you practice until the house is full of melancholy notes that linger like memories in the corners of rooms. Mrs. Lorimer says she cries a little every time you play it. Mr. Lorimer denies crying, but you've seen him dab his eyes with a napkin and pretend it's a sneeze. At dinner one night, Mr. Lorimer announces a visitor is coming, an inspector of sorts from the placement board, just to check in. Routine, he says. Your fork freezes midway to your mouth. Suddenly your old instincts return. Is this a test? Have you failed something? Will they send you back? You sleep poorly that night. The dreams return. The hallways, the cracked tile, the silent meals under gaslight. You wake before dawn, palms sweaty. But when the inspector arrives, he's nothing like the wardens you remember. He wears a tan coat, smiles, takes notes politely. He doesn't ask about bedwetting or punishment records. He asks, "Do you feel safe?" And the question is so strange, so foreign, that for a moment you forget how to answer. But eventually you say, "Yes." He nods, then asks, "What do you like most?" You don't even need to think. "The pond," you say, "and the books." He smiles. "I liked ponds too when I was young." You stare at him. You've never imagined people like him ever being young. But maybe everyone has a beginning. Even inspectors. Even children from workhouses. Later that week, you return to the spot by the pond where you buried the button. You sit there with thimble curled beside you. The ground is still flat, still plain. No magical growth. But it's okay. You don't need it to bloom. It already gave you something. A pause, a breath, a new story to begin. Winter arrives quietly. It sneaks in through the corners of the house, whispering beneath doorways and painting the windows with misty breaths. You wake one morning to find the orchard frosted like a sugar-dusted dream. The pond has frozen over, thinly, just enough to make it sparkle like cracked glass beneath the morning light. You breathe on your fingertips to warm them. It's the kind of cold that clings to the edges of memory. A workhouse kind of cold. But this time you have a scarf that smells like lavender and tea, and someone left hot porridge on the table just for you. At school, the other children arrive red-cheeked and sniffling, their wool coats puffed up like sleeping bags with buttons. You still feel like you're borrowing someone else's life, like any minute someone might tap your shoulder and say, "Oops, this one doesn't belong." But no one does. Thomas brings you a snowball during recess. You suspect it's a joke. It is. The snowball explodes in your face, and for a moment your old instincts kick in. You flinch, ready for shame or punishment. But instead, everyone laughs. And then you laugh too. There's no retribution, no blows, just a harmless game and dripping snow down your collar. That night, you sit by the fire with Mrs. Lorimer and attempt to explain snowball etiquette She listens as if you're delivering a speech to Parliament. Mr. Lorimer leans in at one point and says, "We'll have to practice. We wouldn't want to be unprepared next snowfall." You imagine the three of you ducking behind hedges, flinging snow at one another like unruly children. The thought makes your chest warm. Piano lessons grow more melancholic in the winter. Mr. Tilbury says, "Winter is when music remembers things best." He teaches you a piece that makes your throat ache, though you're not sure why. You play it over and over until even Thimble climbs up on the bench beside you, tail flicking in lazy approval. You get a letter. It arrives unexpectedly with your name printed in cramped handwriting. At first, you're convinced it must be a mistake. But no, it's from a former workhouse boy. Not Henry, but someone else. Arthur. He'd left 6 months before you and vanished into the world, swallowed by factory smoke or railway dust. Somehow he found your name, found your new address. The letter is short, no punctuation, bad spelling, but the message is clear. Are you okay? Do they treat you good? What's it like there? Do you still remember? You stare at the letter for a long time. Do you remember? Of course you do. Every crack in the ceiling, every scrape of metal spoon against tin plate, every unspoken rule of survival. But you also remember what came after. The pond, the books, the piano, the quiet understanding of Thimble's tail brushing your arm as you write. You reply, carefully, neatly, 1 page only. You don't talk about the dresses, or the warm fires, or the biscuits shaped like stars. That would feel cruel, but you tell him simply, it gets better. You don't forget, but you grow around it, like ivy over brick. You end the letter with a drawing of the button, just in case he still keeps one too. Historians still argue how much kinship existed between workhouse children once they left, whether bonds forged under cruelty could last, or whether survival meant forgetting one another. Maybe it depends on the child. Maybe it depends on whether they had someone to write to. That Sunday, you go with the Lorimers to a carol service. It's held in a chapel so old, it feels like it might crumble if anyone breathes too hard. The windows are stained with saints. You don't recognize their eyes, too big, their hands too long. But the music is lovely, haunting, like lullabies meant for ghosts. You sing quietly. Your voice cracks halfway through. In the bleak midwinter, and instead of feeling embarrassed, you see Mrs. Lorimer glance over and smile, mouthing the words with you. You walk home under stars. The frost glitters like someone scattered sugar on the road. And as you approach the house, something catches your eye. The pond. Something's grown there. Not a plant, not a flower, just a small rough stone where the button had been, except it wasn't there before. You crouch beside it, brush away a thin layer of frost. The stone is nothing special, but it's shaped oddly, almost like a heart or a bean or something that doesn't want to be anything at all. You sit with it for a moment, Thimble appears beside you, yawns, and curls into a cat loaf. You whisper into the cold, "I think I'm okay." The stars blink back silent, but somehow not indifferent. You place the stone beside the button's grave, not a marker, not a memorial, just a note to yourself. You're here, you're still here, and you are unbelievably okay. The new term begins with slush in the streets and a library book overdue by a week and a half. You've hidden it under your pillow out of guilt, but eventually confessed to Mrs. Lorimer, expecting a scolding. Instead, she chuckles. "We'll return it with an apology," she says, brushing crumbs from your sweater. They don't flog you for late books here. The contrast makes your stomach flutter. You realize how deeply your bones still expect punishment for small things. At the workhouse, lateness meant shame. Forgetting meant hunger. Crying meant extra chores. Now, it means maybe missing pudding. You walk into school with the overdue book tucked under your arm like a trophy. And when you hand it over at the library desk with a sheepish, "Sorry," the librarian just nods and says, "Happens to the best of us." No lecture, no blacklist, just another ordinary child being mildly irresponsible. And somehow that makes you feel more normal than anything else ever has. In class, Miss Penrose begins a poetry unit. You don't mean to like it, but you do. The words open up little cracks in your chest you didn't know were there. You write about frost, about buttons, about silence. One poem is about the workhouse without saying it's about the workhouse. She reads it aloud and doesn't change a word. Later, she pulls you aside and asks if you've ever heard of Emily Dickinson. You haven't. She presses a thin book into your hands and tells you to read it slowly, like a piece of toast, with too much butter. You read it that night, under your blanket, thimble perched on your hip. One poem makes your throat close. It's the one about hope being the thing with feathers. You underline it twice, maybe 3 times. Maybe hope is like you, small and stubborn, and shivering by the pond. Historians still argue whether Victorian-era charity placements like yours truly provided emotional healing or merely disguised class conditioning beneath a softer blanket. But you know this much poetry tastes better than gruel, and no one here hits you for thinking too long. One afternoon, Mrs. Lorimer teaches you how to knit. You drop every 3rd stitch. She assures you that's normal. You wind up with something between a scarf and a curtain tie. But she wears it anyway, tucking it proudly around her neck when visitors come by. "It's the latest in asymmetrical fashion," she says, winking. You imagine her walking through town wearing that odd little thing and claiming it was all the rage in Paris. Your heart swells. At night you dream less of corridors. You dream more of clocks ticking, of bread baking, of music, and sometimes, just sometimes, of running through fields so wide they have no end. Spring teases the windows with occasional sunlight. You open the glass and lean your chin on the sill, breathing in air that smells less like fear and more like daffodils. You write Arthur another letter. Tell him about school, about the poem, about the scarf. You don't mention the nightmares, just that sometimes the past sits beside you like an old ghost, not angry, just curious. He writes back. It's shorter this time, but he says, I think you're doing it. You don't know what he means exactly, but you think maybe it's this living, not surviving. Living. In April, Miss Penrose lets you help decorate the classroom. You draw a tree on the corner of the chalkboard and hang tiny paper birds from the ceiling. One of them catches the breeze from the open window and spins slowly, like it's trying to remember how to fly. You watch it for a long time. Bird stuck, Thomas says beside you. No, you say quietly. It's just learning the wind. There's a moment of silence, and then he says, That's weird. You're weird. But he says it kindly, affectionately even, and you grin. You've made it through winter. You didn't expect to. The cold didn't take you this time. Neither did loneliness, or silence, or memory. You're growing in all directions. Not neatly, not quickly, but unmistakably. And in the garden where the button sleeps and the stone rests like a secret, something green pokes through the soil. You don't tell anyone. Not yet. It's your private surprise. Just like you, it's taken time. But it's here. The garden begins to change. First, it's just that one shy sprout, no bigger than a matchstick. Then 2, then 3. By the end of the week, there's a small gathering of green stems pushing up through the thawed soil, like children learning to stand. You stare at them from the parlor window, your breath fogging the glass. They look almost defiant. You wait for someone to comment, for Mr. Lorimer to mention them while trimming the hedges, or for Mrs. Lorimer to ask if you've been burying odd things in her flower beds. But no one says a word, so you keep the secret to yourself. You water them with a teacup when no one's looking. You whisper to them, sometimes, quiet encouragements like, you're doing just fine, and don't rush it, which coincidentally are the exact words Mrs. Lorimer says to you whenever your stitching gets tangled. By now, you've become a kind of local fixture, the girl with the blue scarf and odd drawings in her school margins, the one who always pets stray dogs and returns borrowed books early, except that one time. You're not invisible anymore, but you're still learning what it means to be seen. One Saturday, Miss Penrose invites a few students to her home for a reading tea. You're terrified. The idea of entering a teacher's house feels unnatural, like seeing a cat stand on 2 legs. But you go, because you're curious, because she asked, because something inside you wants to know what adults do when they're not standing in front of blackboards. Her house is small, bright, and full of mismatched cushions. A cat named Harold surveys everyone from the top of a bookshelf like an unimpressed librarian. She serves ginger biscuits and hot chocolate in mugs that don't match. And then she reads to you, not from textbooks or dusty anthologies, but from a journal, her own, a story about a girl who used to believe clouds were the ghosts of animals and who once tried to catch thunder in a jar. The writing is strange, dreamy, and lovely. You ask very timidly, "Is it true?" She laughs. "Not exactly, but it could have been." Historians still argue whether Victorian education truly inspired imagination or simply trained children for future obedience. But in that moment, sitting cross-legged on a cushion shaped like a fish, you understand something simple and enormous. Stories can make anything real. Later that week, you try writing one of your own. It begins with a boy who lives in a shoe, not because he's small, but because he enjoys the smell of leather. By the time you finish the second page, he's befriended a hedgehog and opened a bakery. You read it to Thimble, who sneezes once in approval. You show it to Mrs. Lorimer, who reads it twice, smiling at the corners of the pages like they tickle her. And then she says, "Let's make a cover, a real one, with thread." You spend 2 evenings sewing it together, and when you're done, she presses a gold sticker onto the front that reads, "First edition." Your heart glows. You bring the book to school. Thomas wants to know if the hedgehog gets married. You tell him it's a trilogy. He accepts this answer without question. One morning, Arthur's letter arrives. This one's longer, still messy, still almost illegible. But you can tell he's found work. Not good work, not safe work, but something that gives him coins and an address. He says he still keeps his button, still remembers, still wants to write, but doesn't know how. You reply with a blank journal and a note. Start with what you know, add what you wish, then see what happens. It's something Miss Penrose told you. You hope it fits. The garden grows bolder. There are leaves now, little veins on each one like someone sketched them with a quill. And one afternoon when the sun hits just right, you swear you see a bud forming. It's the kind of bud that promises something. You run your fingers over the soil and whisper, "You're almost there," which frankly is what you wish someone had said to you a year ago. Maybe they did, in their own way, with porridge, with poems, with time. One day, Mrs. Lorimer asks if you'd like to visit the library in the next town. It's farther away, bigger, older. You say yes before you can think. On the carriage ride, she holds your hand, just for a moment, just long enough. You step inside a building that smells like every good thing, ink and old pages and polished wood. The librarian nods at you, not like a stranger, but like a fellow reader. You check out 3 books. One is about frogs, one is about stars, and one is about someone who runs away and finds themselves not on purpose, but because they were paying attention. You tuck the books into your satchel, and as you leave, you glance back at the tall shelves and think, "I will come back." Not because you have to, because you want to. The last frost arrives like a final exhale. One more crisp morning, one more fogged window pane, one last chance for your breath to curl visibly in front of your face. And then, just like that, the earth exhales back. Warmth returns, slowly. Not all at once, but in polite stages, like guests arriving to a quiet dinner party. Birdsong becomes more insistent. Coats get lighter. Boots turn into scuffed shoes. The Lorimers hang laundry outside again, and you watch the linen sway like sails caught in a sleepy wind. You begin waking before the alarm bell, not because of duty or dread, but because something inside you seems eager to hear the kettle whistle, to feel sunlight on your face, to check on the garden, your secret patch where the buds have become flowers. Small ones, white, stubborn, and star-shaped. They look like survivors. You name them button blooms. Thimble approves. One afternoon, Mr. Lorimer takes you on a walk. He says nothing for the first half hour, just strolls beside you with his hands behind his back, humming something tuneless. You suspect this is his idea of bonding. Eventually, he stops by a small fenced-off field with a crooked tree in the middle. "This is where I kissed Mrs. Lorimer the first time," he says. You blink. He says it plainly. Not teasing, not dramatic, just history softly told. You look at the tree. It's old and not particularly impressive, but now it's a landmark, a map point in someone else's love story. "I was wearing the wrong hat," he adds. She laughed at me. You picture it, the laughter, the hat, the choice. He glances at you sideways. Funny thing, you think your life's going to be one thing, then it becomes something else. And if you're lucky, you get to laugh about it later. He starts walking again. You follow quietly, storing the image like a photograph you don't want to fade. Historians still argue whether Victorian foster placements like yours disrupted identity or salvaged it. But no one ever mentions the walk to the field with the crooked tree, or the boy who grows flowers from a memory. At school, you present your hedgehog story to the class. You shake the entire time. Miss Penrose holds up her hand at the end and says, "This is how magic begins." You feel 10 feet tall. Later, you catch Thomas doodling a hedgehog in his notebook. It's wearing sunglasses and holding a donut. You grin so hard your cheeks hurt. Arthur writes again. His handwriting has improved. He says he read your story 3 times and laughed out loud on the train. He asks if the hedgehog ever gets to open a second bakery. You write back, "Yes." The second one sells only bread shaped like animals. It fails completely. But the hedgehog doesn't mind. He likes failures. They're proof he tried. You don't mention how much it matters that someone laughed at your words, or that someone wrote you a 3rd time. But you think he knows. The next Saturday, Mrs. Lorimer finds you by the garden staring at the flowers. She crouches beside you. "These are lovely," she says. You nod, not speaking. "They weren't here last year." You glance at her. She doesn't press, just rests a hand lightly on your shoulder. "We never know what the earth's been waiting to grow." Then she stands and heads back inside, humming the same song Mr. Lorimer hums on long walks. That night, you play piano without sheet music. You just follow your fingers. The tune is uneven, hesitant, but it's yours. Even Thimble seems to approve, blinking slowly in time with the notes. Later, you stare out the window and wonder if this feeling has a name. It's not joy. Not quite. Not yet. It's softer than that. Like the whisper before joy. The part where you realize you're allowed to hope. You think about the old workhouse sometimes. But not like before. You don't feel trapped by it. You don't dream of escape. You remember the echo of boots on stone, the clatter of spoons, the taste of thin broth. And then you remember buttons and hedgehogs and a crooked tree in a field. And suddenly the memory doesn't sting as much. It's still there. But you're bigger than it now. You've outgrown it like shoes too tight for new feet. The letter comes on a Tuesday, folded with precision ink, darker than usual, the seal pressed harder. You recognize the careful loops of your brother's hand, even before Mrs. Lorimer hands it to you at the breakfast table. She doesn't say anything, just places it beside your toast and pats your shoulder once softly. You open it slowly. Arthur's writing is steadier now, but you still read each line twice, as if the words might vanish. He writes, "I've been offered a permanent post, laundry assistant. The pay's bad, the water's worse, but it's a start. They said I could send for you if you want, if you're ready. You wouldn't live in the workhouse again. It's attached, but separate, paid. I'll understand if you say no, but it'd be good to be near again. Yours, A." You stare at the letter long after the toast has gone cold. Separate, but attached. Paid, but still there. You walk to the garden and sit near the blooms. They bend slightly in the breeze, tiny white petals trembling as if holding their breath. That night, you don't sleep. Not because you're afraid, but because you're thinking, remembering, balancing. By morning, you've made your choice. You say yes. Not because you need to, because you want to. Because part of healing you're beginning to understand is returning on your own terms. You tell the Lorimers during supper. Mrs. Lorimer sets down her fork very slowly and says, "You'll write, of course." Mr. Lorimer clears his throat 4 times and then mutters something about teaching you how to read a pay stub. They help you pack. Thimble, of course, will come with you. Miss Penrose gives you a blank notebook with a note inside. Keep writing, even when it's hard. Especially then, you press it to your chest like a promise. Historians still argue whether children who left workhouses ever fully adjusted to adulthood. Some records suggest cycles of poverty, others show resilience. But your own history isn't in a record book yet. It's still being written in your letters, in your notebooks, in the quiet way you step into the unknown and choose not to flinch. Arthur meets you at the gates. He's taller than you remember. Or maybe you're just seeing him differently now. He opens his arms, and you fall into them without hesitation. He smells like soap and starch. He squeezes too tightly. You don't mind. You walk together through familiar stone corridors, but this time no one separates you. There are no bells, no shouts, just your footsteps side by side. Your new room is small, but it has a window. It has a bed with a mattress that doesn't dip in the middle. It has a chair, a table, and space. You hang up your scarf, place the notebook by the window, set Thimble's basket in the corner. The walls are bare for now, but not for long. The next morning you begin work. It's not easy. Your arms ache from lifting wet linen. The steam makes your skin sticky. The forewoman barks more than she speaks. But you don't mind, because you know something the others don't. You've seen worse, and you're not scared of hard things anymore. At lunch, Arthur slides you a sweet bun wrapped in paper. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Bribery. You eat it in 3 bites. You write a letter to Mrs. Lorimer that evening. It's 2 pages long and smells like soap. You include a sketch of your new room complete with the crooked chair and your scarf hanging like a banner. At the bottom, you draw the button blooms and write, "They bloomed. So did I." You walk the laundry lines with a slow rhythm. Your hands remember work, but your heart remembers stories. Sometimes as you pin shirts to dry, you whisper tales to yourself about frogs that play the violin or clouds that write poems in the sky. A few workers give you odd looks. You smile wider when they do. You haven't stopped growing. You're not finished blooming. And the most surprising thing of all, you're happy. Not always, not loudly, but steadily, like a fire that knows how to burn low and long. You find a stone behind the building and press your old button into it like a secret, not to hide it, but to root it, because it's part of you, but not all of you. The seasons begin again. Summer peaks in lazy and golden stretching shadows across the cobblestones and making the old stone buildings feel just a little less cold, even in memory. You've been here for months now, long enough for the forewoman to stop glaring every time you sneeze, long enough to memorize the boiler's groan before it erupts in steam, long enough for your fingers to grow calluses that no amount of soap can wash smooth. Arthur has moved to a different shift. You see him less during the day, but more often during the quiet evenings, sitting beside you on the steps behind the laundry, passing the same orange between you, slice by sticky slice. He's reading more now, writing more too. His last entry in the shared notebook he gave you simply said, "This job's still terrible, but I don't hate it quite as much when I know you're nearby." You wrote back, "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me about damp towels." Your room is still small, still plain, but it's no longer bare. The walls are lined with little scraps, bits of stories you've jotted down, drawings of frogs with monocles, a map of imaginary cities made from teaspoons and old shoes. Thimble has a window seat now. She spends long afternoons judging pigeons. On weekends you walk, no destination in mind, just your feet against the world. Once you find a hill just outside the city with a single tree, not crooked like Mr. Lorimer's memory tree, but tall and almost haughty, like it knows something the rest of the trees don't. You sit beneath it and write an entire story in one sitting. It's about a boy who accidentally becomes king of the bees. You laugh out loud when you write the ending. You imagine Miss Penrose, smiling somewhere far away, reading over your shoulder. You mail the story to her. 2 weeks later, she sends a reply. You always had the sting of a good line. You groan out loud at the pun, but your heart dances anyway. The garden at the Lorimers has likely changed by now. You imagine the blooms have withered, made way for something else. That's the nature of things, isn't it? Nothing holds forever, but everything leaves a trace. You've started a new patch behind the laundry. Secret, of course. Just a few seeds and a cracked teacup full of water. But sometimes that's enough. Historians still argue whether any good came of the workhouse reforms, the shifts, the closures, the relocations. Some say the system bent, some say it broke, but they rarely speak of the girl who learned to tell stories about hedgehogs, or the boy who stopped flinching, or the cat who judged pigeons and liked sunbeams. You don't need them to write that down. You already have. One evening, Arthur brings you a surprise, a pair of second-hand boots that actually fit. They're not terrible, he says, holding them out like offerings. They're perfect, you reply already, planning the walk you'll take in them. You break them in slowly across stones through mud along the riverbank. And one evening, standing by the water, you catch your reflection in a still patch. You don't look like the girl who arrived at the Lorimers with a cracked button and a guarded heart. You look sturdy, like someone who knows how to carry things, including herself. You smile at the water. It smiles back, faintly rippled. There's no ceremony to the change, no parade, just the quiet unfolding of becoming, of healing, of staying soft, even when the world tried to make you hard. That night you dream of the garden blooming in winter, of the tree that laughs, of a workhouse filled with flowers instead of echoes. You wake with the words for a new story, already blooming behind your eyes. You reach for your notebook and begin. So now, let's slow everything down. Close the notebook. Loosen your grip on this long, quiet story. You've followed a child through soot and silence, through frostbitten mornings and pages filled with dreams. And now you've arrived softly, gently, at something like peace. The world doesn't always change in loud, sweeping ways. Sometimes it's a bud cracking open through frost. Sometimes it's a sweet bun shared in silence. Sometimes it's a button in your pocket, reminding you that even the smallest things can carry the heaviest memories and still bring you home. Let yourself rest now. Let the quiet stretch out like warm sunlight across your pillow. No more bells ringing in the dark. No more echoes bouncing off stone walls. Just the hush of a story well told, a path well walked, a heart still beating. And you're still here, still whole, still becoming. So close your eyes, breathe deeply, and imagine button blooms growing wild wherever you are. The steam fades, the page closes, and the garden waits for spring. Good night.